Welcome to Stories of a Volunteeraholic. Welcome to another episode of Stories of a Volunteeraholic. I'm your host, Amy Tiemeyer, and today I have the pleasure of a really good friend, new friend, but I consider him a really good friend, John Cummings. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we're getting to know each other, this book that I wrote about all the different types of volunteering that I've done over the years, but I always like to ask, did you volunteer growing up?
I did volunteer growing up. So I grew up in Montana and was in Boy Scouting, and even before that volunteered with my church. And my parents are very involved in the community, so they kind of set that example very early on in my life. But then when I became a Boy Scout, you have, in order to move up the ranks within Boy Scouting, you have to do volunteering, or now scouting, you have to do volunteer work. And so that culminates with an Eagle Project, which is the kind of big project that you as the scout need to plan, budget for, execute, recruit people to do. And we ended up putting planters at my church, which was, were able to be enjoyed for years after that. So it was wonderful. And through that process, I've always learned to volunteer, and it's always been very heartwarming to be able to volunteer in my community. Yeah.
Well, that's excellent. I think it's nice to show even examples for young parents on what modeling volunteerism can do for their kids. Do you have, in this question's like through your whole life, do you have you did this one project and it was the greatest thing ever?
Just one? No. So I think that what springs to mind for me is that I coached mock trial at Seattle U Law School from 2008, when I graduated from Seattle U Law School, all the way through about 2017, I think is when I stopped coaching to go and do some other things. And I'm right now a litigator. I'm a trial lawyer at Eisenhower Carlson. I do real estate, employment, construction law, which is civil trial work, but I also did criminal trial work. And so as a prosecutor for about 10 years. And so it has always been wonderful for me to mentor and see young attorneys who are going into this courtroom to really advocate for their clients and the people in the community. Having an opportunity to help them develop those skills and to do so in a really ethical way was amazing. So my poor husband would have to deal with me driving up on Saturdays and spending an entire Saturday working with the students. I don't want to say kids, even though to me they were kids, but the students. My husband would have to deal with me going up Saturdays in order to teach the students, or going out on a Wednesday evening, and then the preparation for that. But it was always so rewarding to see their skills grow, and now to see them as attorneys in the courtroom representing people and taking care of people. It's like a gift that keeps on giving. Even though I haven't coached mock trial for about 7 or 8 years, it was wonderful and is wonderful to actually see them out there doing good work.
That sounds incredible. I think the same way working with youth and through the years that it is. But I think that means that you found a really good volunteer spot.
Yeah.
Because I really believe that your volunteer spot needs to pour into you. It's hard to feel overwhelmed or, at your bandwidth if you're being poured into. It's very easy to get there if you're doing a project that you're not passionate about. Maybe you're doing it for a friendship or for another goal, which is not necessarily bad. You shouldn't ever do that, but it is the reason why it's not pouring into you. And so I love that. I love that story.
I agree with that. I was, when I was an attorney at the prosecutor's office, I would mentor attorneys within the office, and I still mentor attorneys and young people today. And regularly people would say, I really want to get involved in the community. I want to volunteer. What should I do? And my answer was always another question, which is, what makes your heart sing? If you could not be what you're doing now, what would you be doing, right? And that, for me, is always the seed of what makes a fulfilling volunteer experience. What is it that really makes you happy? Because you're exactly right. it has to pour into you because it takes a lot out of you.
Well, and I also think it has to pour into you for it to be sustainable.
Right.
Because even if you hit a goal or whatever, you're not going to be there long if it's not pouring into your soul. And I talk about this. I had a guest on who thinks it's really funny that I volunteer on a credit union board. Mm-hmm. And I will say that, I really love the credit union that I'm on the board of, but it's not necessarily pouring into me, but I'm doing it for my own knowledge. I'm doing it because they need me.
Right.
And so I'm going to do it for a certain amount of time so that it's a win-win for everyone. But it's not, credit union board, that's my jam.
Right. Right. And I think it's unique in your instance because you have a skill set that is so unique and necessary for credit unions and credit union boards.
Well, and even just understanding money in all its complexities, probably similar to understanding law. Mm-hmm. Like I worked with a woman who's part of a networking group, and her brother own 45 properties in this town in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And they wanted to, which she came to me with, is she wanted advice on how to start a nonprofit to pay for a house for somebody every year. But when you ask, when you make big statements, I have lots of questions.
Right.
All the questions, like, are there no nonprofits that you feel do that? Like where, what is because I believe find the need, fill the need.
Right.
Is an impetus to passion.
Right.
So who is the demographic that you're trying to serve? What is the hole that you're seeing? Different things like that. And when it came down to is specifically her brother, who's a veteran, was feeling like he had a loss of purpose. And I was like, okay, but I feel like you already are backing 45 properties because they're trying to revitalize this community. I'm like, how beautiful is that?
Right.
And so as they're working to revitalize the community, I wonder if a program might not bring more purpose and passion to you than actually building a nonprofit. Because you build a nonprofit, you have all the onus. Liabilities, understanding zoning, understanding target markets, all those things. You create a program to understanding money.
Right.
To understanding sustainability. If you're a homeowner, you're supposed to put, I think, like 1% of the mortgage back into your home every year. So whether it's painting walls, it's doing yard work, flowers, things that help grow your asset, sustain and grow your asset.
Right.
But a lot of people, I don't think, know that, especially first-time homeowners.
Right.
And she was like, that's a good idea. And I'm like, so why don't you and I take a week or two, because it's the holidays, and why don't we throw some spaghetti on the wall and talk about some programs that might build your brother's passion back for what you guys are trying to accomplish, rather than build a whole new nonprofit. You might get there down the road, but...
Yeah, and Amy, I think that's such a really good point, especially not just in Pennsylvania, but especially in maybe Pierce County, Washington, where we are right now, where I think last I heard, Pierce County has the highest number per capita of nonprofits in the country, or something close to it. And so there are programs that can be brought to nonprofits in this town, right? And it's really common for someone who maybe hasn't done the analysis you just discussed to say, oh, I'm just going to start a nonprofit. Well, there might be a nonprofit already out there doing it. And so rather than working at cross purposes where you may actually be starting something that's hurting or interfering with work that's already being done, if you find, like you said, find the need, fill the need first, then you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're not setting up a nonprofit that is going to try and help in a space that's already being satisfied. You're doing it in a more intelligent way, and more importantly, a way that you can actually feel satisfied and not defeated after, at the end of the process.
Right. And I think it's also about building communities. all the nonprofits are trying to do is fill a need, build our community, get, our people to vibe together better,
Right.
especially after this wonderful election. Where you go from here, what do you do now? I think it's a great time for nonprofits to actually step up because there's going to be new and different needs and different ways in which we can work well together. And I think we need to step away from judging everybody so harshly. I think I'm excited to see us work together better.
And I think that one of the things that the nonprofit space, if we're speaking to that specifically, really does need is those volunteers and funders and folks who are going to go out there and help those programs out. Since COVID, I'm sure, and I know this only anecdotally, I haven't looked at any of the evidence, but the nonprofits I know are out there have run into significant struggles since COVID because the pandemic took a huge toll on a lot of nonprofits. And so right now I'm feeling a surge of a lot of people wanting to do something, right? Wanting to be involved in their community, wanting to go out there and volunteer or become part of. And I think that nonprofits are very hungry for that. Nonprofits need that.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like nonprofit, I think giving is down, but I think it's a little bit, I don't think giving is down. I think maybe giving it through nonprofit work. I think this was also a political year, so a lot of people were very concerned in giving to their political candidates. And so I think the money is out there. It was just going in different directions. But I also agree. I think it's like this trifecta, but and I think a lot of people are really frustrated right now, but I'm actually see it as the perfect way to get us to move in the right direction. Like people are frustrated with family values and personal ethics and, what's being, how their kids are doing in school or what's being taught in school and different things. So it's the perfect time to get involved because there's also a lot of not truth being shown, like that kids are bad and disrespectful. And I have, and it is, maybe as anecdotal would be the correct words. It's my experiences over and over again in different states, working with kids, being absolutely blown away by curiosity, by kindness, by, participation. And you hear adults say how horrible the kids are. And I'm like, what kids are you looking at?
Right.
Because the kids that I'm working with, and I'm working with kids in good schools, in medium schools, who are part of alternative school programs, who are even pseudo-incarcerated. And all of them have been doing really well with me,
right?
Which I understand is only my experience, but it is my experiences in multiple states and multiple school districts and different things like that. And I think if you think the youth is where all the problems are, get involved with the youth.
Right.
If you think the housing situation is the biggest problem, get involved in housing.
Yeah.
And
I think that, a lot of times sort of, I know it was rhetorical when you asked that question of, what youth are you seeing? What kids are you seeing? Probably they aren't seeing a lot of kids in real life, right? So much, especially since the pandemic, but even before that, so much of our society has become siloed and segregated. I really think that getting back out there together is a key element that frankly we're missing a lot of. One of the things that we do in our home is we host storytelling evenings. So people come and they tell an honest story of a thing that happened to them, sometimes on a theme. The theme might be something very generalized, right? Like memorable summer vacation or something like that, or family time at the holidays or whatever it is. And they come and the only requirements are that it's a true story. You tell it in 6 to 8 minutes and that it happened to you, right? Not someone else's story. It's your story. And we don't fact check you. It's true as the teller would confirm it. And so we get folks together. We always know that some people are going to tell a story, but we let anyone put their name in the hat that wants to. We draw names and about 8 people speak and tell just a story. It's just people sharing their stories with each other. It takes a couple hours to hear 8 stories, and it is the most magical evening that you could ever have in your home. It's amazing.
That sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
That would be a great holiday tradition. I was talking with somebody earlier about holiday traditions, and that would be a great holiday tradition. I might have to work with that.
Yeah, and it is a great holiday tradition. We actually last year, we went to Montana where my family lives, and they asked, what do you all want for Christmas? And, we've got niece and nephew who are just 6 and 7 now and all of these things. I said, we don't want any things. We want stories. We want everyone to come up with a story, not about us, not about me. It's a story about them. Any story they want, and everyone just tells it like I just explained. And it was amazing because you had a 6-year-old up there telling whatever story he wanted to tell or she wanted to tell. And my parents told stories. My sister and her husband told stories. And it was an amazing experience. And afterwards, my dad actually said, boy, it looks like we have a new tradition. And It's like, yeah, we do have a new tradition.
That is nice. I think that's a really neat way to bond, around family and different things like that. But I think it's things like that also that is what we need right now.
Agreed.
Building and bonding and different things. So part of my territory is Montana, so I'm going to need to have the address of your family. No, I'm playing.
I think we can make that happen.
To become CDM mentors for Travis Manion Foundation, and then, no pressure.
I don't know that I'll give you their address on the podcast, but, offline.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right now I have one Marine Corps veteran who is trying to stand up Helena.
Yeah.
Two, sorry, James.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You're not the only one who does that.
Well, it's funny because we talk about my son Billy and I talk about, he's a big reader. Okay. And I'm a big reader too, but he like twice as many books assimilates than I do. Mm-hmm. And there are times when you hit vocabulary words that you've never heard out loud. And so it's, like you maybe speak them, but you don't realize what they look like written and different things like that. And so we've had some funny vocabulary moments in our family. He's like, what's this book on genres? And I said, or genres.
Well, I do that too. I'm an English major and had a bunch of English major friends in college. And so I'm the same way. I've had those experiences where we're voracious readers, but you don't always know what the word is out loud. Even to this day, I think it's really kind of hilarious.
Right. Well, and I will say, my son Billy has taught me more vocabulary words than any teacher or person in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And we had the pleasure of being in college at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Because just life. I went to college really late. And I was doing an art history class. And so I was asking him to edit because he's a writer as well, and a poet and different things. So he read it and he goes, well, I'm not really autodidactic in this area. I was like, what did you just call me? How insulted should I be at this moment? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what does that word even mean?
Yeah.
Autodidactic?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it means that this isn't an area that I am good in on my own. And I'm like, you couldn't have said that?
Right. You couldn't have just said that part?
But I do appreciate, so I learn more I've learned from my kids more than any other people. Mm-hmm. But Billy, definitely vocabulary.
Yeah, that's awesome. Did you have classes together?
No.
Oh, okay.
He was going to TCC, and I was going to Western Governors University.
Okay.
So, but like college algebra.
Yeah.
I hadn't been in a math class in 22 years before I went to college. And so I asked him, I just want to confirm that I'm answering the right question.
Right.
So he's looking at my math work and he's like, you do math so weirdly. And he goes, but you're actually right. And
He's like, I don't know how you got it right, but you got it right.
And so I was like, okay, that's cool. That's all I need to know, because I don't have the bandwidth to relearn math. And this is funny because I consider being banking and different things like that. I speak math, but it makes sense the way I was taught to me, and I don't want to relearn something to get me right back to where I already know how to be.
Right. I think a lot of us are there.
But yeah, so I think that was a lot of fun is to be in school with him.
Yeah.
But okay, so my next question for you is, in the state of Washington and Oregon, I don't know if it's in every state, you have to volunteer at least 10 hours a year in high school to graduate. Mm-hmm. Do you feel volunteering should be mandated?
So I think that, let me think about that question. I'm not sure whether or not it should be mandated. I think that one, it is, if it is the law, it is the law, right? It needs to be applied and enforced equally. But I think we should, whenever we evaluate those situations, what we should evaluate is whether or not 10 hours is accessible to all of the students, right? So, for example, if a student is working hard at a paying job to put food on the table and a roof over their head while going to high school, that student doesn't have as much time to volunteer as a student who doesn't have those concerns. I did not have those concerns growing up, right? And a lot of people do have those concerns. So I don't know the policy. I haven't looked at it. And as a lawyer, I'm always hesitant to comment on a law that I haven't actually looked at yet. But what I will say is that it's important when we look at that application to make sure it's done equitably, and takes into account that volunteering is a wonderful opportunity, and volunteering is always a luxury. And not everyone, because you're doing it for free, and not everyone can afford the luxury of being able to volunteer. And I think it's important we keep that in mind.
Well, and I agree with that. And, not having a law brain, but just looking at wondering about accessibility. And then I did something with sports in schools over the summer with girls in sports leadership. And some of the things that some of the coaches had brought up was that a lot of nonprofits won't allow kids under the age of 16 to volunteer. So you have a school. Right. So, and I don't know that it's a law. That might have been a but a rule for the school to graduate. But I feel like I thought that was really interesting, that if there's an expectation but not necessarily a pathway.
Right.
Like if traditional nonprofits, because of liabilities or whatever.
Right.
That's it. So it's interesting that it's a requirement. And so I'm wondering what do they do if they don't do it? Like if you don't do it for freshman and sophomore year, do you do 20 hours junior and senior year? Because now you have that so I had a lot of questions. Yeah.
One question that occurs to me in that is what opportunities, if that's a scenario that they're facing where some nonprofits won't let a 16-year-old volunteer or a 15-year-old. And that's true. I've seen that in nonprofits, and the nonprofits who have that rule, usually it's for a very good reason, right? There might be some dangerous equipment. There might be some need for a certain level of CPR care that you can't get until you're 16. There could be all sorts of reasons. There might be just an insurance problem. The insurance company won't let them have volunteers that young, which is probably very common. And no shame on anyone for that, because younger kids are not as responsible as older kids often. But what also occurs to me is if that's what's going on and it is a requirement for graduation, I wonder if the schools are providing opportunities within school hours to do volunteer work. right?
Yeah.
Something where you have to be there anyway. And if this is a requirement of graduation, we're going to, and I don't know what it looks like, pack backpacks for homeless or unhoused and maybe kids who need food, or, work on whatever tasks that can be done while at the school to volunteer. I think it would make sense to me if they were providing that opportunity within school hours.
Right. It would make sense to me too. Didn't seem like that was the case, but I don't know. And,
Right.
My kids are out of high school, so I don't really know other things. But I know that working with different nonprofits, so the Travis Manion Foundation, for you to be in front of kids, you have to go through our training program, and it ends with a background check.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing our program in a school, oftentimes the school also requires a background check.
Right.
So another reason why you have to be 16, maybe they don't have to have background checks because they're not a children's charity.
Right.
Like if it's a food bank or if it's a shelter or something like that. And so that would be something, if I'm directing youth to it, I still see a youth as 16 and 17.
Oh, agreed.
18, you know what I mean? And so I just think all of that would be interesting because I would want my kid in a place that isn't doing background checks as a minimum.
Right.
You know, even if, they could be a absolutely great organization, but I had a scenario with an adult organization that doesn't do any background checks, and there ended up being a predator.
Right.
And so it was really weird on getting support from the parent organization. They're like, well, we just don't do that.
Right. And background
And
checks.
I'm no longer volunteering with them. We will not say who they are, but
Probably best. But background checks obviously have their place, right? And there are organizations where they don't make sense, and then organizations where they absolutely make sense. And I think you're right. I haven't looked into the law on this piece, but it would not surprise me if you have to be 18 in order to consent to a background check anyway.
that could be too.
Yeah.
That could be too. And it's just it's protections. I don't think like I'm not ever offended. And I felt like at one point some of my coworkers felt like it was offensive to ask for background checks or like because the service that they were using, like we had people that had background checks like 2 years ago. And so it needs to be current. If you're currently working with kids, it's just the safest place to be.
Right.
And so we would get these lists that, you need to contact these mentors, let them know we're going to send them an email with a link, and they need to do their background check. Cool. I'm like, not a problem. And some other people were like, I think, they're this upstanding person. I'm like, it's not about that. They're not being pulled out of a list. It's the whole list. It's just a timing thing. And if you're in the schools, I have to get background checks depending on the school district every year, if not 2 years.
Right. Right.
So why would I want my nonprofit that I work with that works with youth do anything differently?
Right. Right.
That's just a standard.
Yeah. You should always, in any nonprofit organizations working with youth, we should always be putting the safety of the youth first. Always.
Yeah. Okay, so conflicted is what I got from your response on whether we're mandating.
I don't know about conflicted. Just I'm reticent to comment unless I see the policy in writing. That's the attorney in me. But I do think that there are equity questions, right? And so that's the real focus for me, is that if a kiddo is being required, because a diploma is essential for upward mobility in our society. You need to have a high school diploma. If you don't, it's not like you can't get along, but things are going to be much harder for you. So we should be really cautious about gatekeeping that or preventing kids from having access to it simply because the circumstances of their life don't allow for the luxury of volunteering. So we should be, if we're requiring it, we should be making that as accessible as possible.
I love that. I love that response. and just the questions. So, do you have any current projects in the world of volunteerism that you're heading up or looking at?
I'm looking at a couple different boards of joining. I want to. I have a little bit more room in my schedule now for some things, and I'm going to be focusing on. I have some cases coming up, some cases at work that I got to deal with that are going to be very time consuming. But I'd like to take a look at some boards that deal with either homelessness or hunger in our community. I think that when we look at what's been going on in the last few years and how prevalent these issues are becoming, I want to always be improving our community and taking care of our community, and it's really important to me to reach out and look for those. So I'm actually on the hunt. I'm actually looking for a couple boards to see, and I'm going to be very discerning because I know that I don't ever want to, and I think I do advise anyone of this: don't join a board if you can't commit the time, because you're taking a space that someone who may have the time could actually be filling. Right. And so I'm going to be very discerning. I'm going to be very intentional. But those are two issues right now that are very important to me. So I'll be taking a look for those.
That's very cool. I think that is correct. And I think there are different types of boards. Like,
yes,
you have fundraising board, you have the networking board, you have the doer board, where, like you're in the warehouse filling bags.
Right, the working board.
Yep. And I think understanding, so once I'm done with the credit union board, I don't feel like board positions are my jam.
Yeah.
Because if I found a board, it would be a working board. Like I love to do the heavy lifting, make the beds for all the soldiers coming home, put baskets, welcome back, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, but I also feel like what you're saying. I don't know that I'm a good board person.
Right. Right.
Because I think I want that to be really good for that nonprofit.
Right. And I think it's really essential to understand that, right? Being on a board versus volunteering or doing both, you have to understand what it is that makes, again, your heart sing when you are going to do that volunteer work. If volunteering on the board at an organization doesn't make your heart sing, if you're not excited to go and read through bylaws and review financial reports and confirm governance documents, right, and do minutes and all the things that are involved in all of that. And as a nerd and a lawyer, I love that stuff, right? But if it's not going to make your heart sing, pretty soon, it doesn't matter if you care about the mission. You're going to get burned out very quickly, right? And so you need to be finding what is the place that makes me happiest, not what is the most prestigious, not what is the resume builder or the title, because all of that either is not what you actually want or is going to come from doing something fulfilling, like doing the volunteering that you want to do for that organization.
Right, I agree. Is there anything else that you would like to tell people who are like you, maybe in that same spot of hunting for the volunteering spot?
Yeah, I think that, that heart sing piece is really important. And you should really find the place that makes you fulfilled, that makes use of your talents, and that also makes you feel like you're growing in some way, whether you're growing to better those skills or you're growing because you're building your network and feeling closer to your community. You should always be growing in everything you do. I think also that if you're looking at board service in particular, I always recommend that before anyone joins a board, they make sure the board has director and officer insurance. It sounds like a small thing, but it is not.
It is not.
You want to protect yourself.
I asterisk that.
Yes.
I do.
Yeah, I think you should check that. I think you should be choosy about the boards you join, right? You should ask yourself, have I met these board members? Do I want to spend 4 hours a month with this group of people on this organization and sometimes face criticism, hard decisions, difficult circumstances. Do I want to do that? And understand that's what it is going in. And then the last thing I always recommend with board service is if you have never been on a board before, look for a board that has experienced board members that are willing to mentor you. It is a completely separate skill set. And I think too many people think that they'll get on a board for the first time and just learn it as they go. And that is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for heartache, or heaven forbid, you get on a board and nobody has served as a board member before. That's not a position you want to be in, because you're going to feel at the end of it like you didn't make an impact. You could potentially face legal liability. You're going to be calling to be one of my clients, or you're going to hurt that organization that you care and love about. And that's not what you want to do. So I think it's really important to view board membership and all volunteering as a skill, just like any other skill that you need to learn from good mentors, that you need to study and develop, and that you're not going to immediately be good at just because your heart is in the right place. I
agree. I'll add one more thing as we wrap up. So on the credit union board that I'm on, there's a compliance committee. Mm-hmm. And in the bylaws, it was one board member is on the compliance committee. And I'm like, why just one? Like, how is that ever going to build sustainability? Right. Why would I want to be on the compliance committee if I never had? So I don't know if I'm doing things right or wrong. Like, I feel like that's at least a 2-person. And so they were like, what? That's a good idea. And so we went through and amended the bylaws that now allow 2, even 3 people on the board to be on the compliance committee as well, because that's where, if you're going to make a mistake with money, oftentimes it is policy related. Mm-hmm. And so so my point is, when you are in those situations, to speak up and to ask the questions. And I said things, I'm like, and I wasn't trying to be like dramatic or weird, but I'm like, I feel like I am the dumbest person in the room. And it's okay, because there's 3 lawyers on the board, a CPA, another broker. And I think, so for me, it's fine for me to say I'm the dumbest in the room. Like, that is just being honest. I'm not trying to be trite or cute. But my eyes are so new to this, like, that's what I see. Like, how can you build sustainability if there's only one person? You're only replacing.
And I think you also make an excellent point, and also it's broader. It's also very broad, which is that even the lawyer and the CPA and the broker can ask questions that may make them feel dumb, and should. Good board members are not afraid to look dumb when they're asking questions that are in the best interest of the organization, right? Well,
I think, well said. Thank you for that. I agree. Yeah. Well, I want to say thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
Being on my podcast is one of my firsts.
I'm very honored, and thank you so much for asking me. I really enjoyed my time and our conversation about volunteering.
Oh, very good, very good. Yeah. Thank you to everybody out in internet land. And my name is Amy T. Meyer. It's John Cummings. And this was Stories of a Volunteeraholic.